What's up, everybody? This is Wesley Hamilton. Welcome to another episode of Out of the Shadows, where I am truly, grateful to have Anna. Um, I don't want to say your last name wrong. I know I always pronounce it the way I want, but let, yeah. Let's like cover it now. Say it one more time.
Sarol.
Sarol.
Yeah.
See, there we go. Right. So,
The roll
again,
part.
I'm like when people see the name, I hear people pronounce it all the way different. So I want to set the tone now and say, you know what, we're gonna have Anna mention her last name, but no, I'm grateful to have Anna Sarol here. It's a great friend of mine, and we'll get that going here in a second. But if you don't know Anna, you're going to be truly inspired by her story today. Today's conversation is basically focused on navigating life after a spinal cord injury. Me and Anna have kind of went through a lot of trials and tribulations when it comes to our injuries, and we have become, um, I would say, driving forces in disability advocacy. Anna does a lot of work when it comes to social media, keynote speaking, and being more of an influence and not just an influencer. And I think that her story alone is something that we can all learn from, and then understand that even though something traumatic can happen to you, that you still have life after it. And that life and that path is whatever you create for yourself. It's not necessarily what you have to see from other people. It's truly what you have a heart for and what you create. So again, thank you, Anna, for being here and being on this show with me. I appreciate you and welcome you.
Thank you, Wes. That was such a warm welcome. I'm super excited for the conversation we're about to have.
Absolutely. So um before we go into like any details about your story and really pushing out like the things that you're doing, I have a quick icebreaker for you.
Please.
Um, so I talk a lot about superpowers, and I want to just ask. So, if you had a superpower related to your disability advocacy,
Oh.
what would it be and why?
Oh, that's a good question. I never thought about when it connects to the advocacy part. Um, I guess this relates to my work on social media, but just being able to outreach to people everywhere. Like outside of just my environment and the states, but like internationally, being able to connect with those people. So I guess the ability to access everyone and to spread a message.
I love that. I love that. And I think you do a pretty great job at spreading the message. But of course, for people that don't know, just the reason why you have, focused on disability advocacy, um, would love for you to kind of take the floor and share a little bit about your story, what got you more into disability advocacy, and yeah, and the direction and path that you're on today.
Yeah. So, for those of you who don't know, I have a spinal cord injury at T10, and I acquired that disability in August of 2015. So I know both perspectives of being a non-disabled person and being a disabled person like Wes. And so when I acquired my disability, there was a lot of things that I didn't know, and I know I was naive to believe that like the disability community was just affected with their physical limitations. So my advocacy really sparked when I recognized all the barriers and far beyond the physical barriers that we see in society and in the community. So the attitudinal barriers, the societal barriers, just everything that relates to that. And I realized that there is not a lot of people who feel like are confident to speak up for this huge minority group. And so I wanted to be able to be the representation that we don't really have in this community. And I thought the best way to do so is to tap into keynote public speaking and also doing social media blogging.
Oh, I love that. And of course, I've seen the journey, I've seen the work, and I've seen the passion behind the work. And I like the fact that you mentioned how some people just don't have the voice and confidence to be able to speak up and advocate for themselves. And a lot of that is projected off of society's perceptions, of the defeating value that society views people with disabilities that sometimes can take away your voice, and for anyone that's watching to understand, like when it does come to individuals like Anna that have the courage to go out and be an advocate, there are still barriers that she faces when she goes out there. She's just willing to be the voice for those that haven't been heard. And so again, like just understanding the power of disability advocacy, because those that are doing the work are literally doing the work despite the societal barriers that are still there every day that we're trying to remove and still haven't been able to remove. Like that's what it is, right?
No, I love what you said because I mean, like, it's true that the disability or advocacy work can get exhausting. And though I'm putting myself in uncomfortable positions, I recognize it's far beyond just me. And it's more like the community, and a lot of people around the world are affected by um, disability advocates and what the change that they're trying to implement in society. So I know Wes also leads by that philosophy, but which I think is why we connect so well.
Oh, absolutely. So even taking it from that, right? Like, of course, I want people to know, like, you're a huge disability advocate. You're making great, impact on your social media and all of that. But how old were you when you acquired your disability?
So I was 14 years old, about to be 15, and that was my freshman year of high school. And so ever since that point on, my whole trajectory changed, like anyone else's that acquires a spinal cord injury. And so it's led to the person that I am today. Now I'm 7.5 years post injured. And so I've gained a lot of wisdom and insights from not only from my personal experience, but from the community and what they've shared, um, and the mentors that are in this community, the huge mentors like Wes.
Okay, so let's take it there. You're 14, you're injured, you're just getting into high school. Like, of course, one of the things that I'm very proud that you have accomplished is graduating from college.
Yes.
And I think that that's important to share because as people do acquire their injuries at any time of their lives, I think your story has a significant impact on those that might not think that they should continue education.
Yeah.
Um, especially when it comes to the barriers in workforce, the barriers in schooling,
Right.
even, like the accessibility in college and universities. Yes, there is issues. But at the same time, I think that like, talking about that journey, right? Like talking about, what was navigating through high school like, as well as like you were injured practicing for a competition and trying to get and become this you know huge star in a sense when it came to that lane that you were in, right? So I think like just sharing that, because I think we could talk about how much confidence we have now and how we're
Mhm.
navigating and being a voice, but I think like it's important to be a voice for those that are trying to explore education, even college. Like you pushed through even though you had challenges, and I think yeah, so just share that navigating high school and college.
Yeah. I mean, so I just graduated with my bachelor's in psychology, and a lot of disabled students don't pursue higher education. And that's because of all the barriers that we faced. And in high school and from K through 12, the system or the school system establishes an IEP, an individual education plan. And when you go to college, you have to be a self advocate and be able to reach out to the Disability Resource Center and say, hey, these are the accommodations that I need for me as a disabled student to be successful in your university. And that was hard to fully establish within me, of like being able to vocalize what I need and where I need it. And I think that's a huge part. I actually almost made, or I'm about to upload a post about what it's like to be a disabled student and attending a university. And there's just everywhere from physical barriers when it comes to hills. So I'm based in Kansas, and I went to University of Kansas, which is the main campus is in Lawrence. And Lawrence, like Kansas is like one of the most flattest states, but for some reason, Lawrence is super hilly and not accessible whatsoever. So I actually attended another campus with the University of Kansas, and that's based in Johnson County area. And that place and this county is fairly flat. But I could only imagine going to the main campus and pushing that hill from one building to the next, because they're not all connected and there's not always an accessible route. So, and
Oh,
you have to also account for the fact that we see all 4 seasons here in Kansas. So, snow and rain and thunderstorms and hail and winds, all of that. And it all plays a role when you're a manual wheelchair user.
and I like, emphasizing the manual wheelchair user at the end, because I think, we'll talk a little bit about the work behind ADA and accessibility, but a lot of access to me as being a manual wheelchair user is created for people that are in power chairs. And because the hills aren't barriers for someone that has power behind their wheels, but for an independent user that is trying to be more flexible, as well as knowing the difference of wheelchairs. So a power wheelchair is most likely going to be a lot more bulkier. A manual wheelchair is going to, one, be smaller, narrow, but it also can be pulled apart for the most part and broken down. Um, so just so people can know the difference. But I went, after my injury, I ended up going to Johnson County Community College, and it was just that factor. It was heels, that was very challenging, and I was still new in my injury. And people always joke about how my arms got so big. I'm probably like them heels that I had to push up. um, but outside of that, elevators at times didn't work. You might have had to go to a whole other side of campus to be able to get an operating elevator, which required you to push longer. And I think that it's just important for people to understand that when you're looking at your college campus, is your college campus actually accessible to people that have disabilities, right? Like, and then it can be created for someone that has limited mobility to a certain extent, but is there access for wheelchair users? Is there convenient access for wheelchair users? And even if it's not, are your accommodations actually something that someone can actually access? Because even having accommodations, but I call the line and nobody answers, doesn't help me. Or if if it's raining, right? Like, and I have to do all this pushing in my manual chair, is somebody gonna come and pull an umbrella up? Or am I gonna have to go to class soaking wet because there wasn't systems in place that actually serve me as well? And I think that, society avoids these barriers because there are certain things that are created to limit our ability to access. Like, why
Right.
would I put a person with a disability in the education system when, majority of society thinks that you receive a check and, that's the rest of your life, right? Like, you get Social Security, disability, something like that. But it's 2023, people. And the pandemic let everybody know that they can have opportunity no matter their limitations. So if you're sitting at home all day, working a good job, a person with a disability can do the same thing. And maybe they just need education to be able to advance like you, but they can't get the education because of the barriers that are in place that just came from the structure, right? The infrastructure itself was just created where it didn't include everybody, right? So, um, again, kudos to you for being able to take those challenges and and show. I don't know. It was to me. It's knowing you and knowing your journey. It feels good to see you graduate from college and be able to set the tone differently. Because I mean, you have individuals that lose their jobs, they don't go back to work, right? Like you still were ambitious enough to pursue something more, right?
Mhm.
So let's think about that, right? Like being able to pursue school, being able to graduate, a lot of that has to come from a support system.
Mhm.
And some of the reason why people don't have confidence after their spinal cord injury is because of the lack of support, and sometimes the support comes from your community, and then it can come from outside your community as well. And so understanding that can really help you become more or find yourself in a deeper hole. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of not only a support system but community as well with the spinal cord injury?
Yeah. My family, I mean, they shielded me from a lot of things the second that I was injured, but also, allowed me to fail so that I can see that I have the resilience that I need to get through challenges that society is going to throw at me. But they were the ones who were grounding me and reminding me that I can do far more than what society has limited me to do. Getting connected with the spinal cord injury community was crucial in making this like a smooth transition from being non-disabled to now disabled. Because I mean, I'm sure you could relate to this, Wes, but like those early injured days where we didn't want to speak to another wheelchair user, where were really advising peer support, but and when you're in those early stages and you're isolated in your bedroom, now told that you're not going to be able to walk again and that you're going to be a part of the wheelchair user community, the last thing you want to do is associate with, disability because of the narrative that society has drafted about this community. And it's oftentimes a negative connotation. And so I think it took me a couple of months to realize that there's so much power in the disability community. And with the spinal cord injury community, they were the ones who were giving me the resources and the tips and tricks and the lived experience that my therapist could never provide for me, though they went through all this education. I don't want to downplay their role too, because they're very profound in the way that I transitioned. But I mean, community is everything.
Mm. No, and it's not downplaying anybody, right? Like it's not. I think lived experiences do bring more knowledge, and it can help someone grow or evolve from their current circumstances. It's that representation factor. Like if the college, institutions were more accessible, maybe we would have more PTs and OTs that have disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm just saying, right? Like you never know, right? Like
That's a good point. Yeah. I never thought of that.
like we can definitely be in every field in life, right?
Right.
Like we can definitely find a way to have an impact in every field if there's access to get there. If there's access for that education, right? Like again, everything comes back to access. It's not the fact that I don't want to go, is that am I going to have barriers that prevent me from being my full complete self because it's creating anxiety. It creates instant depression sometimes when you face a barrier, right? Like you go somewhere and someone's like, "Hey, let me carry you." You're like, "Oh my good." Like just that word, like I can pick you up. Like, are you serious? And then you have to contemplate, like, is this what I really want to do? Can I trust this person? And again, so you have these moments that if I can't just roll in somewhere and have access to be confident, then I have all these underlying issues that will come up real quick that can alter like my learning experience or my growth experience, right? Like it goes into not just schooling, it goes into the gym, right? Like I'm sure,
Right.
and as you've been in physical fitness and doing these things, like I'm sure you've went into a gym where some of the things are hard to access. So it limits your workout for that day. Sometimes, you can ask for help, but most people know how the gym is. A lot of people stick to themselves. And if you're a person with disability, you're probably more inspiring than somebody want to help you, right? Like they just, it's a different tone. But again, if I go in there to try to push myself to get to get to a certain level, the only barrier I have is the access there,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that's it. Like I can go and be pushing, but when I go somewhere, what am I facing? So let's so have you ever had an experience outside of like, the gym and the college where, you faced a barrier and it just kind of made you feel some type of way? Like literally like this straight transparency.
Yes. Oh, yes. I mean, like, this has affected my social life. And as someone who's very extroverted, I find myself having to ask the person, whoever I'm hanging out with, what is the location that you want to meet at? And then having to do my own research about, is it truly accessible? Because it's one thing for a website to say, yes, it's accessible. But does that really meet all the requirements of every disabled person to be able to access that building? And I feel like it relates to this illustration that this one advocate drew out, and I can't recall what their name was, but she said, society will say she can't get in the building because of her being in a wheelchair. And reframing that to be she can't get into the building not because she's in a wheelchair, but because the building's lack of access. It's not her fault that she's in a wheelchair. It's the fault that disability is often the afterthought and we are not accounted for. And we see that every day where there's steps in a building and there's no access. And indirectly, it will communicate to us, you're not welcomed here, you're not thought of here. And we don't want to enter those buildings and we don't want to support those businesses that won't support us on being able to be independent, because the last thing that we want is to go out of our way and go down the back alley to access the store. Like we all know those businesses where, or restaurants where they're like, yes, we're accessible, but what you
But
have to do is you have to go across the street and past the garbage cans and through the kitchen, and then you'll be able to find your seat. And we just want to be able to enter the space that every other non-disabled person can enter.
I
That's all we want.
I really love where you took this. Like I do, because what you did was you added that social aspect.
Yeah,
And of course, we started off with education, the gym. These are things to make you feel good, build yourself to have a better quality of life.
right.
But what about social, right? And most people don't understand that the barriers when it comes to going out, like, yeah, I'm not as extroverted as you, but I do like to get out and I do like to have fun. But
Absolutely.
I also find myself like Google mapping a location, reading through the fine lines to see about the accessibility, looking at the picture, going in a circle. Like, I mean, it's so much extra work just to go to a location compared to a lot of my peers that can just go in and walk in. And I'm not a fan of going in the back of anything. So if you ask me or tell me that your access is the back and going through a kitchen, that's not even, I'm not going, right? Like I'm just, I, it puts a bad taste in my mouth. Like it is just do better, right? Like do better, hire somebody that can help you, create something different. Sometimes y'all overthink access.
Mhm.
And I think having that's where that lived experience and reaching out to someone that has that knowledge or have that lived experience to help you become more accessible makes sense than you avoiding it. And then, having someone like me or Anna come with a group of friends and it's like, no way to get in. And then even adding to that, because I'm out here in LA, and LA does a great job with having by checking the box off. right? Um, if you have stairs, they got lifts, they got elevators, all these different things all around here. But do they work?
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many times I've been stuck on a lift out here, or the elevators don't work. And I think that's also another layer to barriers, right? Like let me come in and then don't include me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like just because I'm inside doesn't mean I can mingle like everybody else,
Right.
and it makes it awkward. So no,
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that, Anna, because that's so important.
Oh, it's crucial. And I mean that, like, we were just talking about, me and Wes were talking about this one space in downtown and being able to access the rooftop, which the rooftop doesn't have an elevator, and that's very unfortunate because a lot of people want to be able to see rooftops and go to the skylines, and that's where social life thrives off of. So like not being able to access this one part of a building that everyone wants to attend
Mhm.
is a struggle. And I mean, I can only speak on behalf of me, but if I'm in those situations, I don't want my friends to feel limited on where they can go just because I can't access it. So it's hard because it's a struggle sometimes.
Oh, seriously, I think, and that's the other, like, who are you serving if you're not creating access for all, right? And a lot of times I think that question isn't really pushed out, or people do think of it as an afterthought. There's a high, we can go back and forth on accessing or grading companies and businesses in Kansas City. Might come one day, so you better start looking out. But seriously, because I think most people don't understand. And I remember going into a building trying to book their space. They had a phenomenal rooftop, and they didn't have access to it. But this organization does a lot of community work, does a lot of work when it comes to youth, hosts many events. And my first question was, you've never I don't even see in your business model that you serve kids with disabilities, and I don't see it. And the structure and infrastructure of your building highlights that, right? Like, and it kind of came from being invited to an event, going, and they had all the festivities on the roof. And I'm like, can I get up there? And they're like, ugh, we can carry you up the stairs.
Yeah. Oh my god. My worst. I'm like, this is.
Like, and it's one of those things, right? But before, it's this experience that I want to highlight. I was doing a keynote speech at the Nelson Atkins Museum, and it was nothing on them. Okay, so but I want to share the location because museums are very modern. um got up there, got up to the location, speaking, did my thing. But somebody just messaged me and it made me think about it. In probably like closer to the end of my keynote, yeah, the fire alarm goes off. Right.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I'm like, okay, please tell me this is a drill. Because if you don't know, if you're in a wheelchair and the fire alarm goes off, you cannot access the elevator. Well, I'm sure you guys know because you walk down the stairs, right? Um, but for us, we have to sit by the elevator and wait on someone to come and carry us down, right? And so in this situation, I couldn't use the elevator. The stairs that was going up were very narrow. And after maybe about 5 minutes of the alarm, like one of the staff members come up like, it's not a drill. I'm like, oh my God. So I had to have like two guys that carried me down the stairs. Long story short, the guy reached out to me recently and was like, yeah, man, I tore my pec or something carrying you down the stairs. And it to me, I'm like, see, when the world's not prepared, people do things that maybe they're not comfortable doing to help us be served, and it creates an injury or something on your end. Like I felt bad because I mean he was just someone that wanted to watch it. And of course, this was years ago, so I'm like, why? You're sharing it with me now, right? But
Oh,
at the same time, it made me think about it. it's like sometimes we're putting people in positions that they're not even comfortable for. And it's because of the barriers of access and the things around us. And so it's like, yeah, like, and that was just a normal like, and then as soon as we got downstairs, it was a drill.
Oh my goodness.
And so I caught the elevator back upstairs to finish my keynote. It was
Oh,
the most awkward situation, and
oh man.
but it was about access. The whole event was around access. So it just literally shed light to the barriers that we face, and then the afterthought of certain things that, when it comes to events and it comes to putting us in a position to speak, right? So
No, emergency preparedness is like huge in my eyes. I remember when I was in high school and we went on lockdown because there was an active shooter in the building. And all these people were talking, and I was on the second floor. So I'm like, gosh, how am I going to get from my classroom to the elevator, downstairs, through the entire building to exit? Everyone was talking about, like, it wasn't as serious because we were able to maintain it, but everyone was talking about, like, I'm going to break this window. I'm just going to jump. And I'm like,
mm,
what am I supposed to do? Everyone can run, and when you're in that position, it terrifies you as
yeah.
a wheelchair user and as a disabled person. So, just speaking on behalf of that, that was just another story that came to
like
mind.
like like can you give me like a generated elevator that's all the way to the, in the back of the building, that's like for emergency only?
Yeah,
um
no
because
kidding.
it's one of those scary things. And I think when people have those conversations about um situations where there's emergency, so weather wise, or
Right.
you said having an active shooter, these are concerns that people with disabilities, especially wheelchair users, that also have those levels of barriers, regardless of where you are, right? Like, I think I seen someone make a post on Twitter, and they were in a wheelchair. They were in like a hotel in maybe New York,
Okay.
and they probably was on like the 50th floor or something, and like the fire alarm went off. And so it's like, even that of like having access to the hotel. Of course, we all want the top floor, we want to look at things, but we also have to be mindful that in case of an emergency, we got to wait on fire, emergency people to come in and walk up 50 flights of stairs just to carry me down, because that's where I am, right? Like, it makes you think of all the things that have been overseen, right? Like, it makes you go into, unfortunately, like, a lot of people don't talk about it, but there was a lot of people with disabilities that, lost their lives in the 9/11 thing, because there was measures that prevented them from coming down all those flights of stairs. And so again, like, being mindful of what access really looks like, because yeah, you get me up to the top, but what's your methods of emergency? And do you actually have generous staff and vulnerable staff and empathetic staff that will sit there with me?
Mm,
Because when I've seen situations happen, I feel like I'm the only one on the floor. Like, I don't even have people come up to be like, "Hey man, you good?" No, they outside, right? Like, so I mean, even that of making you feel alone in a situation that's out of your control.
right. Right. And that has led to us just always being very aware of where the exits are and what is our plan
Yeah.
of action. It's
Signage.
bad.
Signage is very important. If you have an institution, an organization, always show signage. I look for signage all the time that explains exactly what I need to do. I was in like New Orleans, and one of the hotels basically just said, in case of emergency, this is where you're supposed to be. And I'm
Mhm.
like, I didn't even know they could make a sign like that, right? Like, I'm like, you know what? They know where I am if I come right here, but if I go right, like, so
No,
it was
that's
it
great.
was it was a good feeling. All right, so no, like, we definitely, I feel like these are great, important conversations when it comes to people, that do have spinal cord injuries, or in a wheelchair, because a lot of people talk the DEI conversation, or they talk about accessibility, but most people project or assume that all wheelchair users are the same. You know what I mean? And so, when we're talking about spinal cord injury and some of these barriers, this is barriers for individuals that don't have no mobility, can't get out of their chairs, that really use their chairs as a source of their legs, and what those barriers look like. So some of your work is around the airport and the airlines, and of course I've done my own like post around it, but you took it to a whole nother level, right? Like, so kind of explain to me, even when it comes to accessibility in the airport as well as the plane, like what were the steps that you did and what were some of the things that you learned about airline and access?
Hmm. I took a recent poll in my Instagram about what are the things that you don't talk about with your disability that is overlooked. And one of the main common trends that I saw was about airlines and about air access and how tricky it is to navigate that space because of the statistic of 24, 22 mobility devices being damaged or lost by airlines every day. And that's a significant amount. I mean, that's 24 too many. So when I took it upon myself to really highlight all the challenges that we navigate in the airport and on the airplane, I really wanted to highlight what it's like to be a passenger who is stripped away from their legs and fully having to trust a stranger to bring their legs down and to the bottom of the plane, secure it to make sure that luggages and everything won't bump into it if turbulence does come across, and making sure that that even gets down to the plane, because there are horror stories that exist about mobility devices being left at the gate, and then once the passenger arrives at destination, they are stuck at the airline or the airport because they don't have their legs anymore. So one of my most recent videos that went viral, as it should, because it highlighted a lot of this advocacy work. I talked about seat strapping my manual chair onto the airlines on board, and that isn't seen very often. And I do believe that sometimes, or it is important to highlight that power chair users most of the time have it worse because of people laying it down on the side when they're not supposed to, and mishandling it and not having all these proper measures to ensure that it'll be kept in one piece and brought back to the user the exact way that it was brought to them. So that was a whole thing, and I'm sure that I can talk forever about this, but it's very important to talk about when it comes to when we're thinking about law and politics of just air travel for disabled passengers.
So one thing that I recently seen on an article, it stated that within ADA, airline wasn't included.
Yes.
And so like once I saw that, it made me understand why the fight is so hard. Right? Like at first you're like, oh, this is supposed to be a part of the ADA, right? Like and so even learning and educating yourself on that can make you advocate differently,
Right. Yes,
right?
I think I learned, I might be wrong, but I believe that the airport is supported by the ADA, and then the gateway to the air or to the plane, plus the plane is covered by the Air Carriers Act, which I'm still trying to familiarize myself with, but like all that transportation is very complex, so I'm trying to like do my research about what exactly that entails. So it's crazy though, because it's, I mean, like ADA is probably one of the most we're most familiar with, and the fact that that's not also accounted for with airline or airports is huge.
Yeah, and so what are some of your methods when traveling that you do to ensure, that you do make your wheelchair does get to you and that it's in the same condition that it left you?
So addressing the loss of, or making sure that my mobility device isn't lost, I add an Apple tracker onto my wheelchair, and then I can look at my phone to make sure that when the plane is moving, my chair is also moving, because that means that it's under in cargo. In that measure, I mean, it's funny that we have to do such thing, because there are these instances where they have been left behind. And then to ensure that it is in one piece and that it is exactly how I left it, I take a video documentation of a 360, my entire chair. People have done photos before. I think I've found video to be the most helpful, because I'm able to get all the little aspects, and then I can take screenshots for whenever, if I do have to report it and I need that documentation. But to show how the wheel is moving, because sometimes, most of the times when it comes to manual wheelchair users, it's the front casters that get damaged the most, or the brakes that get damaged the most, because those are the ones that are protruding and that are sticking out. But to show how the wheel is moving, that it isn't, causing any issue for the wheelchair user. I mean, just the whole 360 of the chair, and even flipping it upside down to show every aspect of the chair is crucial. It's crazy that we have to do that, like right before the airline, or right before that we get on board.
So people, now think about this. You have the largest minority group that's in the world, people with disabilities. Right now we're talking about spinal cord injury, so individuals that use the wheelchair for the most part. And other factor in this is that majority of these people are on fixed incomes. Majority of these individuals don't have the best support system all the way around, right? My point is, we still have to go and purchase an air tag to make sure that your wheelchair comes back and comes to you properly and safely, because of the lack of understanding and the lack of education that goes into training and the individuals that are working with our mobility devices. But then you have to take time to record, right? Like, and take pictures of your device just to make sure it comes back in the same piece. Now, I'm not saying that, it's a bad thing to document, but what I'm saying is that everyone doesn't have the mobility that myself or Anna has.
Right.
Spinal cord injury starts at the top of your spine all the way to the end of your spine. And so, or to the bottom of your spine. And so, depending on where you're injured, speaks on your level of mobility. And again, everyone doesn't have that ability. So, it's important to share these factors, because I think in a lot of things, we end up spending more money to be accommodated. I even took note recently of booking for a hotel and realized that all the ADA rooms cost more. And again, I'm good with that if society doesn't have to perceive that we aren't supposed to be self-sufficient. Right? Because again, like, if people with disabilities and are getting certain funding, access, and ability to have and do all the things everyone else can do, then cool. Prices is prices. But when it comes to accommodation and access, you're paying more. You're paying more for the convenience, right? Like, instead of having someone that creates it in their model, that just creates a level of access, or safety or comfortability, right? So
Yeah.
I think that is important. I just want people to know, like, living this wheel life comes with a lot of cost and a lot of heartache sometimes, when you just want to be independent and live freely.
Right. Yes. And that, I mean, like that, one of the most frequently asked questions that I get is, do I wish to walk again? Or what's the hardest thing about disability? And it's not the fact that I'm unable to use my legs. It's not the fact that I can't run or jump or climb anymore. It's the fact that there's these society barriers that are preventing me from living a full life.
Yes. Oh, I mean, society barriers. And when you think about societal barriers, you have to think it's not just the infrastructure that starts, right?
Right.
But then I always say, like, you can be inclusive, but are you, right? So your whole facility can be like the airport. The airport, to extent, is accessible. I still have my views about it. But a lot of the staff aren't knowledgeable when it comes to access or disability. So
Mhm.
you're missing a layer, right? You're missing something that can actually serve more. Because me coming into the airport and knowing that you have a tiny seat that can get me on the airplane, but then you have two staff members that don't even know how to lift me up, doesn't really work for me, right? And again, like for me, I have the strength. For Anna, she has the strength, but for someone that can have a higher injury or even new in their injury, that one experience can be their last experience, right? Like, and you hear many horror stories of people with disabilities that are mishandled in a lot of different professions, right? And I'm not the person to hear my bad or I'm sorry, because the everlasting pain and effects of dropping someone in a wheelchair um, goes beyond your apology.
Mm. Mhm. It's scary sometimes. It is terrifying, and we are mentally scarred.
Like it creates all these levels of anxiety. Like you don't want to do this again. You like it's a lot. It's a
Mm,
lot. And I want people to understand it. And we haven't even talked on pain, right? Like
yeah,
we haven't even talked barriers on like natural pain that you get
yeah,
from nerves and things like that. All we've been literally having a conversation about right now is access and being included and societal barriers. And it's, I think people need to understand how compact and like this conversation is,
mhm,
because all of these underlying things to be living life and free and independent, and you haven't even got to your injury yet. Like you haven't even been able to explain, okay, well, this is what I deal with as having a spinal cord injury.
right.
It's like we're talking about just getting outdoors, right? So kind of shift a little bit because of course, like if you guys are just joining in, I have Anna Sarol on the call, and we're talking about navigating life after spinal cord injury. Anna acquired her injury at the age of 14, but she has, you know, since then have become just a huge disability advocate, keynote speaker, doing like different short term educational videos and um, just a moving driving force in the disabled community. So one thing that I do want to acknowledge, Anna, is you being a substitute teacher. Because again, your life, oh, your life is amazing. Because you're shifting what people think, right? Like, of course, we're in sports, and Anna's a badass when it comes to fitness and stuff. Trust me, I trained her. We did our
Yeah,
thing.
I have a good trainer.
But I mean, from navigating high school to graduating college to being an advocate and a keynote speaker and all these other things, but having a passion to be a substitute teacher, right?
Yeah,
Like talk about that. Talk about what is your normal like uh range of ages that you substitute, and like what is your experiences, and what are you trying to teach the youth through your just organic work of being a teacher?
yeah. So I wear a lot of hats. Like Wes said, keynote speaker, social media blogger, model, substitute teacher. And with every role, I find that I'm still advocating. And one of the biggest things in my eyes is to be able to educate the youth about how to truly build an inclusive and diverse and accessible future. So when I stepped into this role, I've been a substitute teacher for about 4 years now, and I primarily see early education, so K through 5. And with each classroom that I'm stepping into, I'm devoting 5 minutes to do disability 101 with these kids, the people or these children, to provide them information that I wish society taught,
Mm,
such as disability etiquette, teaching them that the word disability isn't a bad word. And then far beyond that, about accessible parking spots and how crucial they are because their parents will often pick them up from them. And that's a whole other topic of itself. And
yeah.
then also just accessible bathroom stalls and making sure that we leave that bathroom stall available for people who need it. Because the last thing that we want to do is go into a bathroom when we really need to go to the bathroom and then see that all the stalls are open except for the accessible one. And us wait 10 minutes for someone to do whatever they're doing in the bathroom stalls. I'll often see like teenagers just filming TikToks in the bathroom in the big bathroom stalls all together. Or we've seen like, which this isn't mother's faults, but the changing station being in the accessible stall and having to change their baby, and that's not their fault. But when we think about accessibility and design, that's not a part of what this inclusive design looks like, because now we're waiting for a mother to change their baby and them having to wait for us so that they could change their babies. So vice versa. But also in the classrooms, I talk about the importance of, hey, like you can talk to disabled people and we are very friendly just like anyone else. So opening that conversation, because I know that oftentimes their parents, more often than not, will say, no, don't stare, I mean, like, don't ask these questions, like shy them away from disability and the conversation of disability, which is part of the reasons why we see adults who very visibly show discomfort about when sharing like close proximity with a disabled person. And we can point out every nonverbal behavior that shows that they weren't open to the conversation of what it means to be disabled and share space with disabled individuals. So I do a lot with them, and they always have the most curious things to say. And I love it because, again, I think that it's really important to reiterate that it's okay that we have curious minds. And I want to really point out that when you have those curious moments in children, to not shy them away from that, to invite them to maybe start that conversation with a disabled person. And if that disabled person doesn't want to share, then to respect that,
Mhm.
and then address the child, hey, like, they didn't want to talk about it. Sometimes you don't want to talk about things, and that's okay. Why don't we go home and do our own research online so that we know what it's like to serve these people. So
Mm. Such good gems right there, Anna. So good. I love being around kids too. They're very unapologetic, and they have all the questions that once you become an adult or even an adolescent, you don't ask anymore. Um, and I've learned that it changes their perception instantly when you can literally just have a conversation or answer questions that make them see us, right? Like outside of the way that their parents do. Because a lot of people's experience are based off of someone else's opinions or perception about the disabled community.
right.
And so being able to, yeah, so being able to, sit in front of children and organically just teach them, right? Like, so I guess that leads me into the next question, because I think that's a great point that you make. About teaching kids. What steps, what steps would you like to see society take to become more accessible and inclusive?
I would love for them to get educated and look at their inner circle and include disabled voices in that so that we can build a world that's empathetic and that knows all these different lens and angles of life, so that we're starting to look for it in the real world, and we're joining allyship to the disabled community and being advocates on calling out business. I shouldn't say calling out. I don't like calling out. I like calling in better, because calling in sounds a lot more of what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Calling in businesses about the barriers that they may have overlooked. So I think it's important. With every keynote that I end with, I stress the importance of non-disabled becoming allies to the disability community, or even advocates or activists. I mean, like, those have different degrees and levels, but to somehow look at their inner circle, look at their feed on Instagram and social medias, and making sure that they're intentionally adding diverse voices in it so that they can know how to serve other people in the world.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So if you don't have diverse voices on your feed on social media, we looking.
Yes.
And it's important to have that visual representation, but it's also important to make sure that you are having conversations with people that have disabilities so that you can truly see your business, your institution, your organization serve all. And if you can't serve all, having an understanding on the language to utilize when it comes to maybe your accountability of lack of access or barriers can help other people feel still included, because you're holding transparency. Because of course some buildings are grandfathered in as a term, right? Like, of course I'm not a fan of it, but sometimes that's an excuse. It's an excuse, but being open with someone can let them know. But then also, let's find a solution together. Let's don't
Right.
end based on just this one term or something that we know. Let's figure out how we can work together to create a more inclusive future, right?
Right. And having a solution. I actually learned, so I attended the ADA symposium, which is the most comprehensive conference about disability laws. And it's a 4-day event. And I just got back from it, and I learned and took away so much from that. But one of the things that I really learned was that there's no such thing as grandfather clause. So
Mm.
you're actually under the ADA, even though your foundation and structure may be built along before the ADA, you're supposed to have some kind of solution to be able to serve disabled people to access your business or
Woo.
facility. And that was like, I mean, like, there's so many times where I tolerated that. Like, a business will say, well, we're grandfathered in. And I'm like, okay. And so I'm like, okay, guess we have to go somewhere else. But no, that's actually a myth that exists. And we're tolerating it because we don't know.
Ooh.
And it's huge to have that knowledge, because now I'm looking at businesses and saying, like, where's the ramp that you guys are supposed to provide? Or, yeah, anything like that.
That was so good. That
Yeah.
was so good. And thank you for educating me at this moment, because I've been too nice with that term.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm going to do more research in it, and I'm still digesting all the information I got from this weekend. But oh my gosh, that just changed my entire perspective of that term and how people use it. So I just wanted to include that because I think it's important for people to also know.
No, absolutely. And at least from my understanding, when I visited London for the first time, they had buildings that they would have mentioned been some type of grandfathered in, but they made accommodations to create access.
Right.
And so, yes, the structure could have been, but you still create access.
Mm-hmm.
I have a good friend that makes a point that she says, you're creating a world that you wouldn't want to live in.
Mm-hmm.
And if everybody's going to experience disability at some
Right.
point of their life, if you're not creating access for me, you're hindering access for you, your family members, or someone that you know now or in the future.
Yes.
right?
Disability does not discriminate. You
It
can
does
quit
not
anytime.
discriminate.
Listen, if you live long enough, you too will be affected by this.
You too. So as we end, Anna, share some points that you would want the community to know about spinal cord injury. And then, for those that could have a spinal cord injury, what would be your last words for them as well?
Yes. Oh, the advice piece. I always get this question, and I think it always reflects where I am at life at the moment. And so, my biggest advice would be if you're comfortable, to really tap into becoming an advocate and educating yourself on disability laws. Because I didn't realize how many laws there were that to support us, and it goes far beyond the ADA. I mean, you have like the ABA and all these other ones that can support and help us navigate this world. But also just to like, if you're in those early injured days, to really just be able to grieve and sit with yourself and sit with these emotions, because I think it's so crucial that we do so. I remember so many times I was fed like toxic positivity, and I never really processed my emotions. And as someone who's a mental health advocate, I think it's crucial that we do so, because it'll show up in the future if we don't. So that, and like also get connected with this amazing community. I mean, there's a lot of us, and there's a lot of us that are doing amazing and incredible things. So once you open your lens to realizing that, your life changes.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, community, finding your tribe, right? Finding your tribe and being the change you wish to see. So advocacy, if you don't see change, you can be that change. You can be the voice. And one thing I would leave with for everybody is just that, we are not the circumstances that we're currently in. We are what we set to be and become. And so, no matter what position or place you are in life at the moment, you can become so much more. Life is about growth. So, imagine how much you can evolve daily if you push yourself. Take the
Mhm.
baby steps to understanding and acknowledging all of you so that you can pour you out into the world organically and authentically and become a change just by doing that.
Right. Oh
So,
no, I love that.
all right, Anna. Well, thank you so much for tapping in and chatting. We did get some great comments. Shout out to my guy Raul. Um, Definitely said that you just made some amazing points, Anna. And he loved the fact that you shared about non-disabled people becoming advocates. You can always be the voice for the voices that aren't in a room. You don't have to wait. So, again, thanks everybody for tapping in. Until the next time on Out of the Shadows, deuces.
Thank you.